This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you like underground music, movies, and more, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed merch, vinyl, CDs, and more. Plug in the discount code 10OFF, TENOFF, for a 10% discount at portlanddistro.com. Guys, welcome back to the show this week. We have Bobby Torres of Frightbox Studios, as well as Voidscape, a brand new project. Well, it's actually not new, as we'll learn, but their most recent EP came out on Nefarious Industries, and it features my bandmate, Justin Spaeth, on drums, as well as Mike Goncalves of Replicant, Windfaerer, Putrascension, Grimace, a bunch of bands. Really cool guys, a great record called Odyssey of Spite, and definitely check it out. They just played their first show a couple of weeks ago. And Bobby, aside from being in that band, is a great recording engineer and mixer, and he has done two of Tombs' releases recently, Under Sullen Skies and Monarchy of Shadows, as well as a host of other bands, other metal and extreme bands in the area. Before we get started, I want to shout out my fellow horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. On Monday, we have Brandon Legion bringing us Horror Wolf 666. On Tuesday, the best, greatest metal podcast on the internet. Of course, that's Into the Necrosphere, brought to you by Jackie Smith on Tuesdays. Wednesday, of course, is Everything Went Black. I return on Thursday, Necro Thursday, with Mike Scandato and Jeff Kashid. Either one of us or all three of us will get together occasionally and talk about horror movies. Sunday, Carl Hikara comes at you with all things dark. Soul Knox is his podcast. And he and I are embarking on a collaborative project called Darkness Weaves, where we alternate episodes each month and cover the work of Carl Edward Wagner. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so by listening, first and foremost, sharing it with your friends, or by joining the burgeoning Patreon community. For as little as $1 a month, you can support the show and get access to a host of weekly bonus content. For $5 a month, you get all the bonus content plus early access to the regular stream. For $25 a month, you can be a sponsor, and I will read copy for you at the head of one episode a month. It could be anything. A band, your business, another podcast, some sort of project, anything. And yes, I am trying to remember to mention that we have a social media presence, and you should follow us on Instagram, Twitter. You know, you can follow me on Twitter. I don't really tweet that much, but I'm on there for the time being at least. Facebook. And also, leave us a review, 5-star, if you will, on Apple Podcast or whatever platform you choose. Yeah, dude, it was great running into you last night in my sort of unexpected visit to you guys' practice.
And we found your watch. I don't know if you know we found your watch.
Oh, yeah, man. Dude, Ninja told me he found it in the garbage.
He did. Which is crazy. I don't know how that would have happened. I guess, I don't know, somebody threw it out by accident, which is crazy.
Well, I can tell you exactly how it happened, actually. I usually take off my watch and I put it on that mic stand or the music stand, and that just happened to be right by the garbage.
Oh,
and I guess like somehow it fell in there. You know, I was rocking out too hard last night, the other night, and it must have fallen into the garbage. And I was like, damn. But yeah, that was funny, man.
Dude, good thing he found that, because that's something that could have easily gone missing forever, you know?
Yeah, and I like those watches too. They're those cool, like tactical looking watches,
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, dude, thanks for having me.
Dude, it's been a long time coming, man. And I've been meaning to have you on to talk about a variety of things, but this seems with the Voidscape EP out,
Yeah.
this is very timely. I think that when you come here as a guest and we talk about that, we talk about the studio, we talk about your channel and all that kind of stuff.
Hell yeah, man. I'm ready.
Yeah. So Voidscape, it's been sort of a long-term project that's been in the works for a while, right?
Oh yeah. It's something that started kind of just as a little kind of fun side. I had, here's the thing. I have a bunch of riffs that I always record and then I don't do anything with them, right? Because I have my main band, which is called King Kelly, and we had been pretty much inactive for the past 8 years. Now we're doing stuff again. But throughout that, from I would say 2013 until 2017, I wasn't doing much of anything. So I would just record a bunch of riffs. And obviously I'm a metalhead. I produce mainly metal. I love metal, but I haven't played in a metal band since I was a teenager, like that long, maybe early 20s, right?
Just hold on one second. That the other band what is that other band? It's like a progressive kind of thing, or what is it?
I don't know what you would call it. I guess you would call it kind of, I don't want to use the word progressive. There are progressive elements, but we're sort of like a weird blend of, I don't even know, a combination of the Strokes mixed with some metal. You'd have to check it out, man. I think you'll dig it. It's all clean vocals. There's some screams as well, but yeah, Steve is the singer of that band, and we've been playing together for almost 20 years now. So we're working on an EP right now, actually, as we speak.
Yeah. So back to Voidscape. So this has been a collection of riffs that you've been working on for a long time.
I had a huge collection of metal riffs, right, and didn't know what to do with them. Because me personally, I'm not Mr. Guitar. Like, I love shredding. Don't get me wrong. I love guitar playing, but I'm not into like recording instrumental stuff. And a lot of guitar players, they'll do like instrumental music, right? They have a bunch of riffs. I always like being in bands. I like having a singer or a screamer, and I like there to be actual lyrics to the songs, but I don't really sing myself. So I thought to myself, who do I know that could easily come in here that would be fun to work with, that would be quick to work with? And right away, Ninja came to mind, Justin, obviously, right? And Mike, because I've worked with both of those guys in, oh my God, man, I'm not even exaggerating, at least 8 projects per guy, like Ninja, he was in Abacinate, then he was in Hammer Fight, he still is. And then obviously Tombs, he has a bunch of Putrascension, and same thing with Mike. I used to work with Mike in a band called Grimace, and then he started his own band called Windfaerer. Then I worked with him in Replicant, and other bands as well. So I contacted them. I sent them the demos. They love them. And we knocked out 2 songs. Super easy. A year later, we did another single. And then throughout the pandemic, I decided to kind of put an EP together, and we did the EP. And that's how it came to be.
That's a good time to focus on that stuff when there's nothing else going on, really.
Oh, yeah, dude. Totally.
It was probably really therapeutic, I imagine, to, keep your head together, really.
Yes, definitely. And it was fun also because, as you know, Ninja plays guitar and Mike is a songwriter. So they sent me their ideas, and then I had fun with them I had my riffs as well. We kind of just, in an organic way, melded everything together. And then it's funny, I take forever to do my guitars and the bass. I played bass on it, and Ninja does his drums in like 2 hours. And then Mike does the entire EP in like two takes. So it was a lot of fun, man.
Yeah. Ninja's like the go-to New Jersey metal drummer. Everyone, he gets calls constantly to fill in. He played in Sworn Enemy a bunch of times. Like, they're a New York band, but they ask him to fill in a lot, and he's a really easy guy to work with. And as far as guitar playing, man, I mean, you and I both know, he's probably he's like one of the better rhythm guitar players.
Oh
around,
yeah,
really,
and a great riff writer, great songwriter. Yeah. He's like the Dave Grohl of metal, I guess, in a way.
I'm waiting for him to do his own, just like top to bottom solo project. You know what I mean?
He has to, dude. Yeah. So it's just the combination. Also, personality wise, we all gel personality wise because everyone in the band is just pretty easygoing for the most part. So it's just been a lot of fun, and I had no high hopes for it. I just thought we'd put it out, and then ended up the EP ended up getting picked up by like Nefarious Industries. So they put it out.
Greg? You know Greg Meisenberg?
I do. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I met Greg I think right around the time I met you. I know he was in Tombs, and I helped him out. There was a guy I know that did guitar repairs, and then he ended up meeting me at the studio, and that's when he was in Tombs. And then I met you that same summer. But by the time I had met you, you guys had another bass player, but it was like right on that cusp. So I had met Greg previously around that time.
Yeah. Greg joined the fold at a very critical point in the band's career. It was like, there was a big lineup upheaval. we were, you know, our Metal Blade record just came out, and we had all this touring set up, and we didn't have a bass player. And
Oh,
Brett Bamberger is the guy who put me in touch with Greg.
oh,
Brett's like the linchpin of a lot of different operations. It feels like, you know,
yeah.
he's like the go-to. He knows everyone. Like he's the connective tissue between a lot of people, you know. And
Cool.
so Brett connected. And actually, Meisenberg and I had been on tour together prior to that. He was playing drums for Ringworm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you didn't know that? Yeah.
Wait, so Greg plays drums also?
Oh yeah, yeah. Greg is a probably a better drummer than a bass player.
Didn't
Yeah.
know that, dude. I thought he was just a bass player. Wow, learning something new.
Yeah. Yeah. Greg was playing in Ringworm. Brett had already kind of hit me to the fact that, you know, he was part of the little crew of New Jersey people, you know.
Yeah.
And we were on tour with Ringworm and Darkest Hour. And I was like, oh yeah, this guy Greg, he seems like a cool guy, whatever. And then it turned out that he ended up joining the band for like the rest of that year, just for
Cool.
touring purposes, you know, because we had a bunch of stuff lined up that year. And yeah, Greg's a great guy. He's talented. Nefarious Industries has got a lot of very interesting releases.
Oh yeah, dude.
A lot of it. What I wanted to kind of expand on is that, you know, there's a lot of progressive elements with Voidscape. You know, I listen to it, you know, it's like blackened death metal, but also I hear like Chuck Schuldiner, like death, you know, like
Oh, cool.
kind of like like later death, you know, not even, I mean, definitely the earlier stuff, but when, you know, Chuck started really expanding outward and bringing in all these different, you know, King Crimson, like a little bit of that, like sneaks in there.
Yeah.
And then just like some kind of like, especially the intro on the record, like that kind of old school, like a heavy metal, like Screaming for Vengeance or something like that.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
like heavy metal intro kind of thing, like grandiose, you know. And Greg's got a lot of different releases on that label. Some of it's like instrumental, like you know, very, 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 very player oriented.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why I think this fits really well with you guys, the aesthetic that you guys have.
It's worked out great, man. And they've been really professional, really responsive. Like they put out it's just been a lot of fun, you know, and we got it out. The release is on cassette tape, so I can die happy. I have a release officially on cassette. That's all I wanted in my life, was to put out an EP or an album on cassette or vinyl, and I'm set. So, and he's done it. So I'm happy.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So last night when I walked in the middle of you guys' practice, there was another guy there though. Like,
Yes.
you saying on the record, it's you on guitar, Mike G on bass and vocals, and then Justin on drums. So
Actually,
who's this guy? Other guy?
On the EP, I'm actually doing guitar and bass.
Okay, so you're
on
okay.
EP.
Sorry.
So that's the problem, though. It's only been a studio project. I'm going to be honest with you. The first time we had ever played together was last Saturday. All these years that I, recorded these guys in the studio, and even throughout this project, we had never jammed or played together. Now everyone is seasoned enough where like they know the demoing process. They've done it 1,000 times. So, even though we haven't physically played together, they understand, Ninja's great with the click and we have all that down, but we didn't have a bass player or a second guitarist. That's something else we've been talking about. So what happened was we had this show offering about 3 weeks ago. Maybe not even think it was a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. And Mike said, do you want to do this show? And we're like, yeah, we just need a bass player. So we booked the show without having anybody. So, so we're like, what the hell are we going to do? And we've had a few names that were thrown around, and that's Big Daddy Mike, actually. So we have two Mikes in the band right now. We have Mike, the singer, Mike G, and then Big Daddy Mike, who's actually the bass player of Mike's other band, Windfaerer. So he's
you guys
playing.
are great, by the way, too. Windfaerer is a great band.
Oh, I love them. Yeah, super great, progressive-y kind of a folky kind of metal band,
Yeah.
So Mike came in, man, and this kid learned these songs, which blew my mind in a matter of actually more like two and a half weeks. They're not crazy technical, but they're also not simple. Like they're all in different keys, and there's all this weird riffage happening, and he nailed it. So that's who that was. That's who that was playing bass last night.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like there's a lot of changes in the songs. There's like, you guys play around with tempos, the keys change quite a bit. And and that's what comes to mind. Like for me, just my rudimentary understanding of music. I think about bands like Death, and there's like kind of progressive stuff. It's not so much like some Marty Friedman type, stuff like that, but it's just like interesting, very riffy music, and Mike's vocals always are great,
Well, it's funny. I'm glad you brought that up because my vision for this, and I think the Justin, Mike, and our vision originally was sort of like because we love. I mean, all of us love all different styles of metal, but we really love At the Gates and like melodic death metal. That would probably be my main influence in the '90s when I was growing up playing guitar. So that's how this project sort of started, right? But when we did this EP, I know myself, I'm like, I'm gonna really just do some weird, really experiment, and like I'm gonna throw some Phil Collins shit in there. I don't care. I'm gonna just see what happens. Like I'm like, what do I have to lose? Also, production wise, for me, from a recording engineer's perspective, I was experimenting also with like keeping it really organic, like super organic. With the drums, it's a lot of ambient mics on the drums. I pretty much wanted the EP to sound like Steve Albini produced it, which is an odd mix. So I was nervous, man, when I sent them the initial skeletons of the songs. I'm like, yo, these guys are gonna think this is shot. I don't know, and they seem to dig it. And then I think the thing that really brings it together is Ninja's drumming, right? Because he's got that that signature thing about his drumming, and then Mike's voice. So when you have those two elements, it works, So yeah, I'm happy with the way it turned out, and the reception's been great, man. I honestly didn't expect it to be as well received as it has been.
Funny that you mentioned Steve Albini. I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because like your style of production is very and probably just because of the need to go in that direction because of the type of clients you normally get at the studio.
Yeah.
Probably just, want to sound like, like metal, what I mean?
Of course.
Like super compressed, very tight kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, is that style, Albini style, is that something that you're like when you first started getting into recording, was that like a producer or engineer that you admired?
That's a great question, man. It's funny when it comes to production, growing up, I was never interested in studio stuff. I was never interested in production as a whole. I was always a band guy as a kid. And long story short, in the early 2000s, I had a friend that was doing these demos out of his basement with a simple home studio, and his production quality was beating out like bigger studios in my area. And when I would work with him, I started to kind of ask him questions like, oh, how are you making the kit? And I slowly developed this addiction to production, right? So at that point, I was already in my 20s. And for me, my go-to guy growing, at that phase was definitely Andy Sneap and what's his name? Colin Richardson. So I really love those guys. Now, subconsciously though, throughout the 90s, I was a huge fan, obviously, of like the alternative scene when that was happening. And even like some of those older, more raw record, those like, the old Cannibal Corpse, the old Morbid Angel recordings. I like that sound. But when I was coming up and starting my career as a recording engineer, nobody really wanted that sound anymore. Everybody wanted that polished, crisp, super, modern sound. And I love that. Don't get me wrong. I really love that. But in recent years, as an experiment, I've been kind of just having fun experimenting, going back to that Steve Albini style where it sounds more like a band just physically there. You know what I mean? And that's something I've been experimenting with. Also, I've been recording a lot of live production stuff as well. For a second YouTube, which a whole other separate thing, for a second YouTube channel. So yeah, great question. I think I love both, and I just hadn't had the opportunity to explore that side until recently, if that makes sense. But I love both.
Sense too, because you said you're into like that kind of 90s alternative sound, and Albini was all over that whole scene in the 90s.
Dude. And I think with him, for me, it's not even so much about the genre that he recorded, is that he is the master at capturing a band in their natural element. You know what I mean? Like when you hear any of his recordings, like that's how that band actually sounds in a physical acoustic environment. Like he's really minimalistic. He's not a big fan of overproducing stuff. Like he has like, I think he actually makes the band play mainly live to track the main tracks. So like,
you're right, actually, because I remember reading a thing where he was recording Plant and Page, basically Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And they would just jam. Like they would just like go into the room and just play. And that was pretty much how he made the album.
Yeah. And there's an energy there, man, that you like that truly is unique when you do it that way. I found anyway. You know, now obviously it has to be the right project. Now, Voidscape was in a way recorded like that, but not 100%. Like my goal was to kind of capture that vibe. Obviously, we still did the drums separately and the guitar separately and everything else like that. But the way that I went about it, my mindset was more like, you know, stick a room mic on the guitars also. Like, why not? You know, shit like that I would never really prioritize if I were doing a straightforward metal production where everything has to be crystal clear, you know, sort of thing.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, with Albini, a friend of mine, like back in the heyday in the 90s, you know, their biggest goal was to record with him. So they recorded an album with him, right? And you know, this band called La Gratona. They were like when I lived in Boston, I was a huge fan. I lived in Boston for like 5 years, and I was like a huge fan of this band. And they were like a little bit ahead of their time and a little bit after their time, and they were like too intense for like indie rock types, you know, and like not metal enough for metal crowds, you know. But
I know the feeling. Yeah,
they were kind of like Dead Guy before Dead Guy was Dead Guy, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but
with like even more like kind of different sounds mixed in there. And people that are listening to this will probably know who I'm talking about, because this band's come up quite a bit on this show.
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember they booked time with Albini out in Chicago, and like he's like you know, he's basically like a whore, you know. You can call him
he'll do anything.
He'll do anything, you know. If the price is right, he'll do anything.
Yeah.
So so they show up there, they load in, they do their thing, and they're playing. And my friend, his name is Taz, he was like trying to get a read on Steve as to whether or not like he was into it or not.
Yeah.
He was just like yeah, okay, you know, very medium, very much like flat, like I'm just here doing my job. He's like a plumber, you know. He shows up, does his job.
Well, that's it, dude. That's his whole jam. Even in interviews, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure this is obviously he did In Utero by Nirvana, which is a massive album. He refused to take producer's points on that album. Like he did not take, so he was just paid one lump sum. I'm sure it was a lot of money, but he was paid one lump sum. And to him, his ideology, his way of looking at things is he's like a plumber. Like he looks at himself as like, it's a trade. It's like, I'm hired to do a job. My opinion really doesn't matter so much, meaning this is what he believes. He's not there to impart his vision on the music. It's there to just capture what you already are. So that's why he'll do any band. I think like you were saying, if the price is right, I think it's like $2,000 a day to record with him. It was like a couple of years ago. And I even thought one day I would like to record with him just for the hell of it, like a single, you know? So got to knock it out in a couple of days, but still, so that's an interesting way of looking at production. And that's very unique. And that's how he does it. Even with Nirvana, even with the biggest band in the world, he still didn't want to take producers' points, which is pretty crazy.
The funny thing about that whole thing with producers, you know what I mean? Like, and you think about, I think that really surfaced in like in the music that we would listen to maybe in the 90s, I think in the 80s, producers and before that too, a producer would be a guy who like hired a songwriter and like put a band together and then hired like it would be more of a hands-on trade,
Yes, totally.
And then suddenly these guys who are engineers figure out here's an angle I can make a little bit more money, but basically they're just engineers.
Oh, totally, man. And now the lines are even more blurred because of technology. I mean, look at my studio. It's it's like a one room in an industrial complex. You have guys like what I do is we call ourselves producers, but in reality, we're like a combination of three different things. We're a tape op, we're an actual producer, and we're also an engineer. So the lines now are so blurred. And you have guys that make beats on Fruity Loops and call themselves producers, or engineers. So I think it's interesting how that role has shifted, and it's cool to be called that now, so it's cool.
Yeah. And with the technology too, in a way, it almost adds I don't have a problem so much these days with dudes calling themselves producers, because in a lot of ways, all the magical stuff that goes on with technology, especially now that you get into the beat making industry, like there's definitely an art to that,
Oh, totally.
And I think that if you're in that world of electronic music, then that's like you're a producer. You're basically creating the substrate for the entire musical endeavor, and then your ideas are being layered on top of that, and and you're collaborating sometimes with those artists. Like my friend Alop, who used to play in Dialect. I don't know if you know Dialect.
I've heard the band Dialect. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
okay, yeah. Like I've observed, he's a friend of mine, and I've been to his studio a bunch of times, and he's kind of laid out like the kind of stuff that he does, and he's just like, yeah, these people come in, they have like a video of them doing stuff, and it's like,
really?
Like that's, just like voice notes versions of songs.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And they're like, we need someone to put this whole thing together.
Yeah, exactly. So that's his job then. Yeah.
Yeah. And his job is steps in, okay, these are the beats, playing around with some tempos. And, his main platform is Ableton Live.
That's really popular with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then he mixes in Pro Tools. Right. So, yeah. So like, he exports stems, and I guess he likes the editing and mixing capabilities of Pro Tools more than Ableton, I imagine. Yeah. I've only played around Ableton a little bit.
It's amazing, dude. I mean, for that kind of stuff, electronic music, hip hop, anything that's electronic based, it is unbelievable. Ableton is really sick. And then also, obviously Logic is really, really good. Pro Tools is sort of behind in that department, I got to admit, but as people always seem to clown on Pro Tools all the time, but to this day, as far as like working with real bands in reality, real drums, like Pro Tools still wins as far as editing and being able to work and comp takes on the fly. So it's different to me. Pro Tools is more like a virtual tape machine, and then Ableton is more like a creation station, producing kind of platform. But they all there's crosstalk between all of them,
Yeah, totally. Now in the metal world, when you're do you ever have, what kind of, like, do people ever come to you and be like, this is my idea for a song? Like, yes, here's us playing live, like in a recording room in our practice space.
Yeah.
Help us. Like, does that a role that you fill?
Yeah, it's funny. For the longest time, I didn't do a whole lot of that, because in metal, at least, again, I mainly do metal. A lot of times metal bands, they have the stuff done for the most part. It's different. It's a different way of thinking. But I'm working with a rock band right now, where that's what we're doing. So like they'll have the skeleton of the song, and then we sit down with guitars, and I'm playing guitar and I'm helping them out, arranging, trying, switching to key, even different ideas for like certain tempos. So we're starting from scratch, and I'm actually building the songs with them, but they're more of like an alternative rock band. Sure. So it's weird. It's a different mentality. Now, of course, there are producers that step in with metal bands that do the same thing, but I work with I do a lot of brutal stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, it's something that I'm doing more of now, because now for some reason, a lot of the younger bands around here are I've noticed they're either old school, like Priest kind of stuff. Even new metal is kind of coming back, which is wild.
You were telling us about that when we were doing the record. We were talking about these new bands calling themselves new metal bands.
And now it's even crazier since then. So I see a lot of that. And then now I'm getting hit up by a lot of bands that are just more kind of just middle of the road rock, which is cool too, And those bands are the ones that I've noticed request, or at least for me, this is my own personal experience, are wanting more production stuff, even in the pre-production phase. So, and I love it. I really love that. I love fulfilling that role as well. I love it all, man. I love each stage of production, For me, it's still all part of the same soup, so to speak.
That's interesting though. I mean, because, you're like the thing that you have at your disposal is your musical capabilities. Like you play, like you're music, a lot of, sometimes you'll run into guys that are recording engineers that don't really play necessarily.
Yeah.
Or their expertise is in something that doesn't translate very well to the format. You know what I mean? But at least, like, within the rock and metal world, you kind of understand what needs to happen. And you were talking about changing keys. Like you can hear maybe a vocal line where it's like, maybe you're in your range, you're singing out of your range. So let's change the key, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And I think also from a band's perspective, it is important, especially for those kind of bands, to have an outside ear to kind of like, especially if not everybody's agreeing in the band, like I've been dealing with a lot of like, one person thinks the band is an Evanescence kind of thing. And then the other person in the band thinks they're kind of more of a screamo thing. And it's like, yo, okay, forget about the genres. Let's just hear the songs and let's work on the songs to see what fits her voice best. That kind of thing. I love it.
That's like an age old, that exists. I bet it even exists in like Cannibal Corpse or something like that.
Totally true.
I bet each one of those guys has their own idea what the band should sound like.
Oh yeah. But honestly, man, I think that's what makes bands unique, because like if everybody agreed 100%. A lot of times bands will end up just sounding like other bands, where you have that weird blend of people. I think is sometimes how you end up with sort of like I'm going to go out on a limb here. I really liked how on the last few Tombs records, maybe it was the EP, those were like you had some New Jersey like chugging riffs out of nowhere. I thought that was awesome, and obviously that's coming from Justin, right? Like I think Justin wrote a few breakdowny kind of sections.
You know what? Honestly, I wrote the breakdown.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, yeah, you're thinking on the EP, there's like a real thuggy part on one of the songs.
Yes, exactly.
And I think somehow, but it was actually when I wrote that, I didn't even live in New Jersey at the time. I still lived in Brooklyn. So, but maybe it was my
hardcore
my travels stuff across, the Outer Bridge crossing into the dirty Jersey that influenced that writing style, maybe. But yeah, absolutely. Those guys have influenced me. I mean, Todd's playing with us now, and Drew.
Oh, that's awesome.
Drew,
yeah.
Drew is like a master on bass, man. And he has like that rock and roll, like kind of vibe.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole.
So it all blends together. So that's cool.
In a unique way that makes it unique, no, even with the Voidscape thing, it's funny. There's a riff that's straight up New Jersey hardcore style, which I would never play in a million years. Not that I love that stuff, but it's just not part of my natural DNA. It's actually hard for me to write atonal stuff. Like my brain always goes towards melodic stuff. So Justin wrote a few riffs that were straight up like ignorant, heavy, but blending that in with the crap that we have, it creates this unique kind of weird Frankenstein of a jam, and I love it. I love it, man. It excites me.
That's awesome, man. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. Like The Secret is like that song Baron, which was under Sullen Skies. Justin wrote that one, and that's like super melodic.
Such a great
song. That song is all melody, and Justin actually wrote that song.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. Yeah, Baron's the one. I remember that's the one that's really like harmonic minor, like dark. Yeah, it's a good one. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's very dark, but it's melody. There's a lot of it's not so much like what you would expect Justin to write the thuggy, like brutal, like riffs,
Yeah, he's a talented dude. Totally.
I love it, man. I love collaborating with people, man. It's like the best thing ever.
Same here. It's my favorite, and it's cool too because when you have the right personalities, like collaborating with someone like Justin or any of those guys, is they're not like the egomaniac control freak type. And that's what makes it so free and so I can't describe it. Like, because I've worked with people that, like, for example, I've worked with drummers that are great drummers, but they don't ever want to play a normal beat. Like they have it's like, dude, like I get it, you're good, but play a normal beat here. Like that's the kind of stuff I have no patience for anymore. I don't know about you, but I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been that great of a guitar player, so it's never like I'm like trying to show off my technical ability because I've pretty, I'm not that great really, but like I played in bands with drummers specifically who are just playing to get like pats on the back from like other dudes who play drums.
The worst, worst, dude. I can't stand that. This is just my opinion. For me, my favorite musicians of all time would be guys like, let's see, like Alex Van Halen, Eddie Van Halen. Now, Eddie Van Halen is known as an amazing guitar player. Obviously, he's a virtuoso, but if you really listen to what he's doing, there'll be sections of the song where he's playing one note for like measure. Yeah. Because he gets it. Like he's coming from a place of in my opinion, he's coming from a songwriter's mindset, not a guitar shredder's mindset. And now I know most people will think he's a shredder, and he is, but really a lot of his stuff is really lyrical. That's why for me personally, I'm not a huge fan of like, now I love Steve Vai, I love all these gods, right? But like I can't listen to that stuff for like more than a few minutes, like I need good songs, I need vocals, I need hooks. So when me personally for my own music, when I play with musicians that are all about, showing off all the time, even guitar players, dude, I've played with guitar players where it's like, they just don't want to play a normal riff for some reason, or the solo section has to be, 2 times too long. It's like, dude, cut that down. You don't need to, it doesn't have to be that long, so that's my whole thing.
What's funny about Eddie Van Halen is like, apparently 2 of his biggest influences, there's Tony Iommi from Sabbath, and Eric Clapton.
Oh, Eric Clapton's a huge influence on Eddie Van Halen, and you can hear it. Actually, you hear it in there a little.
There was oh man, what the hell is the name of the record? There's a record that Eddie Van Halen did that was like a solo album that had like another title, and the title's escaping me. It had like some like science fiction like spaceship painted on the cover of it.
Really?
Yes.
Or are you thinking about Surfing with the Alien?
Nope. That's Joe Satriani. I know
Yes,
that. I know that. There was. I'll send it to you. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes here because I can't
I'm
remember
curious
what
to
it
know.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll send you information about it. But it exists. I do not own a copy of it, but I'll find out about that. And yeah, there's some. But it's apparently it was like a more blues oriented kind of Clapton-esque kind of thing that he was doing.
Never knew that. I knew, it's funny because people always would bust his balls back in the day for not doing a solo record, and he would say, "Well, all my records are solo records." That's what he'd say. I know he did a soundtrack to like an '80s teen comedy in the '80s. Like he did the soundtrack to that, and it's funny. Right now, the song "Right Now" that came out in the '90s. The piano part is in the soundtrack, so it was like before the song was written, before Sammy was even in the band. And then in the 2000s, he did the soundtrack to like a porno movie, like some random stuff. In like 2004, literally in like 2006, he did the soundtrack. But I didn't know he has a solo record, dude. This is exciting. I gotta hear this. This is crazy.
Yeah, it was something. It's like one of how like in the 70s and the 80s, like stuff will just come out and then just disappear forever, and
yes,
it's probably not even streaming anywhere. Like it was something like that. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah. So how long? When did you start the studio up? The Frightbox, studio endeavor. When did that whole thing start?
That's a great question, and I have an answer. Unfortunately, it's gonna be long, but I'll tell it to you.
We're on a podcast, man.
I'll shrink it down. I'll shrink it down. I'll get to the point. So, like I was saying earlier, I've always been a fan of music. I've been playing guitar since I was 10 years old. When I was in high school, all I wanted to do was be in a signed metal band that toured. That was all I thought about 24/7. I eat and breathed music, right? Like playing guitar. In the early 2000s, there was a local. So as you probably know, right, back in the day, to have a good sounding release, you would either need to have a really good producer and a lot of money with a label and like a backing, right? Or you would have to know someone that was just really, really talented that had access to a lot of equipment. That's generally how it was in the 90s. Like it was hard to have a good sounding demo when you were a local band in the 90s. So obviously all of us local bands, kids, we never had great sounding recordings. So it's hard. There was this kid that was in a local band. His name was Adam Horniak. He was in a local metal band called One Lump Sum back in the day. And he used to intern at a studio, like a proper studio. And out of nowhere, he built like a small home studio in his basement. This is like the year 2001. And these records were coming out that sounded like legit Roadrunner releases. And everyone is like, dude, Adam's recordings are amazing. And pretty much what happened to him is that he ended up recording every single local band in like the immediate area in New Jersey. It was insane. Because why would you not? I mean, you're paying peanuts to this guy who's doing a great job, and it sounds like album quality. So everybody was going to this guy, including me. And again, at this time, I wasn't interested in production. But as I spent time with him, I realized I'm like, oh, wait a minute, he doesn't have a lot of equipment. Maybe I can get something similar and record demos, right? That was kind of my mindset. I was already like 20 years old at this time, so I was all like halfway through my psychology degree at school. So little by little, I ended up becoming more and more interested in it. I bought all the same equipment that he had, and I decided this is what I want to do. So I switched my major over to audio production. I went to a different college, pretty much had to start from scratch.
What was the setup that he had? Was it like ADATs or something like that?
Great question. He actually had, it was not a Task. It was a Roland 8. So it could record up to 16 tracks. You can mix 16 tracks on it, but you can only record 8 at a time. So it was a minimal setup. He had 2 studio monitors, a Roland. It was a hard disk recorder, but it was not a DAW, right?
Oh wow, one of those old school like a mixer with the hard disk storage. Okay, great.
Yes, but because he had worked at a studio and he was talented and had an ear for it, he knew how to work that thing, man. It was crazy. And so what I did is I worked in a music store at the time. Is I bought the Zoom equivalent. And it was pretty much the same thing. You could record 8 channels at once, like, a whole drum kit, and you can mix up to 16 or 24, something like that. And what ended up happening was I started recording my own band. And this is when MySpace was popular, as you probably remember. We would put out the demos and people would message us going, yo, who did your recording? And I would say, well, I did it. And they're like, oh, you pay us? Can we pay you to record us? And I remember at the time, dude, I wasn't even thinking about this. That was the furthest thing from I had no interest in recording other artists. All I cared about was my own band. That's all I cared about. And I said, well, okay. And then That's how it started. So it just honestly started like that. I didn't even have my degree yet. This is like 2 years before I had even graduated with my audio degree. And then I ended up recording, the dude Adam must have hated me because like I ended up recording a lot of the bands that he was recording at the time,
Competition.
Yeah, which sucked because he was a good friend of mine, and I don't know if he still records, but he actually did. Are you familiar with Mark Rizzo, the guy from Soulfly? Of
course, yeah, he's yeah.
Yeah,
so he was in the Cavalera thing too for a while.
Yes, yeah. So I was playing with Rizzo at the time, so we were all part of the same scene, and he did all of Rizzo's like solo projects and stuff like that. But then after that, I don't know what happened with him. I think he kind of just decided to stop recording. I think he got really burnt out because dude, he was recording like 7 days a week, every local band under the sun. So, and then I sort of ended up starting to do the same thing, but out of the spot that in the industrial building.
So that was the place that you moved into then?
That's Rizzo's old room.
Oh, okay.
So it's crazy because I was playing with Rizzo, and then Rizzo ended up forming a whole new band, or he went out on tour. So I ended up not playing with Rizzo, and I ended up somehow inheriting that room throughout time. It's so weird. But anyway, so that's how it started, man. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And then, as you know, when you're a freelancer, the word gets out there and other bands recommend other bands. And then before you know it, you're doing, you're working 24/7 on projects. And that's the story.
One of the coolest things as a client that I like about your studio is the nonstop loop of horror films playing all the time.
Dude, it's funny. It used to just be, it was a VCR. And then I realized, I could digitize. I'm out of my mind. Like 7 years ago, before I moved into where I live now, I decided to digitize every VHS tape that I own. And I own hundreds of VHS tapes. I digitized them. And the cool thing about that is you can loop them onto TV. And that's what I ended up doing. So now it's on a constant loop. The TV I have back here, I don't know if you can see it, that has horror movies looped on it 24/7 as well. I just have it off right now, but there's horror movies playing right now on a constant loop. It's just inspiring, No,
it's actually relaxing, man. Because I know, like, when we were working together, I'd be doing guitar tracks or whatever, and you're listening back, and even while you're playing, like if you're kind of in that, a groove, you're doing these like tremolo picking parts or whatever.
Yes.
And you're looking, and then there's like, like the fog is playing with no sound, and there's just imagery. Dude, and it just creates this vibe, man. It's like it's very relaxing too.
That's how it is for me. It makes me, there could be days where I'm not even in the mood to like do anything musically. And then when I see that stuff, it just puts me in that creative mindset. Funny story, man. I just found this out recently. So, I've been doing this for years with the horror movie thing, right? I worked with a really good band recently called Poeta, and the guitar player I've worked with in his older band. So we were talking. He's like, "Oh, I gotta tell you something." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Dude, our old bass player," meaning his bass player from his old band, that dude thought you were like, apparently it really offended him that I was playing Silent Night, Deadly Night. Like I was completely oblivious. I had no idea, but apparently this kid was like, I'm never going back to that fucking place. There's something wrong with that guy. Like he actually thought there was something wrong with me for playing Silent Night, Deadly Night on a loop. I'm like, dude, I was he went to the wrong place then, man. Cause
See, that's what I like about you too. It's like, you're just like, if that offended you, you came to the wrong place, which I think is awesome.
Dude. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's how I look at it, man. It's like, dude, I mean, first of all, look at the building that we're in. Second of all, I mean, the place is called Frightbox Recording. I mainly do death metal bands. What do you expect? Like, and it wasn't like, dude, it's a cheesy 80s slasher. It wasn't like I was playing like, Faces of Death or something messed up, like apparently I really offended this kid. And it's funny because I was completely oblivious. I didn't find out until years later, and I was dying laughing. I'm like, yeah, that's classic, man. Who knows how many other people I've offended without even realizing.
Do you have any scenes from Faces of Death on there?
No, I'm weird, man. Like I was into that stuff when I was a kid. Like I would watch a lot of that. And as I've gotten older, like anything real, I want to have cheesy 80s stuff or horror movies, anything that's like, fiction I'm a fan of, but anything that's real, it does the opposite. It just bums me out, Yeah,
I'm on the same page, even though most of that Faces of Death stuff, at least from that first one,
it's fake.
A lot of that's fake, but stuff like Cannibal Holocaust or something where they kill they kill like all these animals, and
terrible.
That's too far for me, actually.
I agree. I totally agree. And even, for me, when it comes to horror, like, I know there are guys or fans in general that like they like horror just for the gore. Obviously, you know, gore adds to the vibe. You know, like a Romero movie isn't a Romero movie without gore. But for me, it's more about the story and also the music and the atmosphere overall. Like when I'm watching Dawn of the Dead, what's unique about those movies is that you're in it sets a vibe that's unique to that movie or that director or that whatever, you know, Halloween, Dawn of the Dead, any of the classics, you're in that world. And that's why I like a lot of the older horror stuff versus a lot of the newer stuff. A lot of the newer stuff, it's hard for me to connect to because it's just CGI. Like, I don't know. That's maybe I'm getting older now, but like, for example, everyone was going crazy about The Conjuring. And I remember seeing it in the theaters. I'm like, yo, this is really good. And then once it started to get into the CG ghost thing, I checked out personally.
Yeah. Have you checked out Terrifier, the Terrifier movie?
I've heard it's really good. I have not seen it though. What'd you think? Did you see it?
Yeah, I would recommend it. I mean, it's funny. I've been following Art the Clown's trajectory since early on because there was a series of films that Damien Leone made, and there were shorts, and Art the Clown pops up in a couple of the shorts, right?
Oh.
And then Terrifier, the first one came out, and I watched that, and it was like just like real gritty, real brutal, very like you know, like I can see people just not digging certain parts of that just because it's so intense, you know, and
does it feel
you know, and
old
people
school?
criticized it. What was that?
Does it feel old school, like an 80s kind of thing?
It has like that. It's like if you took that for the first Terrifier, it feels like a movie from like the 80s.
Love it.
But the atmosphere is fun, is like that, but the things that they're depicting, it's like very current, you know, it's like very extreme, you know what I mean?
Cool.
And you know, really unsettling. And I dug it though. I thought it was cool because it's like a modern slasher, you know.
Yeah.
That we don't really have too many legit new characters. It's always like rehashing of old characters.
Exactly.
Terrifier 2 takes it to the next level, dude. Not so much like it's very intense, like gore-wise, but the story.
Really?
Like it really, it's like I saw it in the movie theater, and I have the Blu-ray too. When I haven't had a chance to get into the Blu-ray stuff, the extras, but he builds up this whole mythology around it, and there's like this, he's a supernatural character. There's like other characters involved in this thing. It's like a universe.
Oh, that sounds cool.
And it takes place in New Jersey too. And there's
how have I not seen? It's funny because I've seen the images, I've seen the stills, but like I just thought it was like a generic. But then again, it has gotten a lot of good reviews from real horror guys, so I have to see it.
Some of it, there's a club scene that takes place in QXTs in Newark. In
the second one or the first one?
In the second one.
That's insane. Is it actually at QXTs?
It's shot in they don't like if you recognize the inside of the club. You know, it's like some goth night, you know, type thing. And I'm like, that looks really familiar, man. It's like it's got to be QXTs. And then in the credits, it was like QXTs. And
that's incredible.
You know, yeah. And it's funny because a lot of it is funded by like, you know, whatever, like GoFundMe or whatever, you know, some equivalent to that where people would, you know, add money to it.
Yeah.
So there was like a couple of things in there where I'm like a couple of like odd cameos of like weird dudes that I'm like, oh, that guy must have paid to be like an executive producer or something like that. You know, like some random dude with like a baseball hat will show up in a scene. And I'm like, I don't know, but it just adds to the whole like vibe of the film, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The grittiness. I love that stuff, man. Yeah. Cause for me, when horror is too polished, I'm not, again, nothing against the newer stuff. You know, there are like, dude, Hereditary I thought was really good. I also like Midsommar. I mean, that's like true, unique, like that's disturbing shit, you know?
Yeah. Midsommar, I liked it, but I didn't love it because it reminded me too much of like Wicker Man, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it did have that vibe. It really did.
And Wicker Man is one of my all-time favorite movies.
The original one.
Yeah, the original. Yeah, well, there's the Cage ones, which is like there's that, the Nicolas Cage one, and then it also has like a very brief James Franco cameo at the very, very end.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like in the last scene, it's like they added it. They're like, oh, we got this hot new actor. Let's put him here. Let's tag this other silly, ridiculous.
Terrible.
Yeah, but the original Wicker Man is like, just hits all the boxes for me. All the stuff that I really like. All that weird British, like occult stuff, you know?
Yeah.
But Hereditary, I really, really liked Hereditary. I thought that was awesome.
Totally, man. It unexpected, like I heard rumblings that it was pretty cool and I ended up seeing it. I'm like, yo, this is like actually not everyone got it though. I've noticed some people really didn't like it. And I think they expected it to be like The Conjuring or something like that. Right. For me, it was more of an occult kind of thing. And I think that shit really creeps me out personally, and it was just too real, man. Like when, I don't want to give it away, but like when certain people died in the movie, it was just too real. It was just too realistic, and what I mean is like, it was effective. It was you felt it,
The thing that I got the biggest kick out of is like, I saw it in the theater, like right before, like when it came out. So all the trailers had that girl in it,
Yes.
The funny looking girl.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And you think that but without knowing the plot, you think that she's going to be like a major part of the film.
Exactly.
Like it's going to circle be like her and some bizarre stuff, right?
They pulled a psycho.
She just gets like fucking killed.
Dude, and like in a way that's like so disturbing. It was like, that's the thing that whoever writes that, Ari, I forget his name, the director / writer.
Yeah.
Dude, he gets in your head like in a way that's just, it's even, well, with Midsommar, for me, the most disturbing part of that entire movie is the first scene when the girl is talking to her sister who's, has issues, right? Yes. And when they showed the death, like that to me was the most disturbing part of the whole movie. It's the first 10 minutes. It was like, dude, that's too realistic. Like, cause I can imagine that happening, like that playing out like that. It wasn't like, again, a CGI goblin coming out of the woods and stabbing somebody. Like that doesn't do anything for me personally, but like the way that he portrays certain occurrences and deaths, again, I don't want to give anything away. It's disturbing. It disturbed me, and it a lot of stuff doesn't disturb me too much, really, honestly, because I've seen so many horror movies at this point, but his writing is pretty effective in my opinion. I didn't see his newest movie with Joaquin Phoenix though. Have you seen that yet?
Not yet. I saw a trailer for it and I'm like, man, I don't know about this. It's, I'll see it eventually, but I'm not rushing out to see it in the theater. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've heard mixed things. Some people I think really loved it. Other people, I don't know if it's really a horror movie, but I'm curious. I'm curious to see what he can do outside of like the Hereditary / Midsommar jam.
What's really what I'm excited about is there's going to be a new Nosferatu.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Robert Eggers is doing it. He's the guy who did The Northman and The Lighthouse and all that stuff.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Yep.
Dude, which is funny because a little connection there. What's his name? The dude that's in the White House, in the Lighthouse. Not Pattinson, the other guy. What's his name?
Dafoe.
Yes, William Dafoe. I don't know if you know this. Played Max Schreck in Shadow of the Vampire, which is about
that's a great one.
It's a great movie. Yeah, it's a fictitious story about the making of Nosferatu, which I thought was a great movie. But it's funny that director is doing Nosferatu. You had that. He's not involved. I'm going to assume, right? No.
That's it's funny. Like in Shadow of the Vampire, Max Schreck is actually a vampire.
Yeah, it's fun. So I love that, dude. I love weird stuff like that. I thought that was a great movie.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. That's like that version of like. That Count Orlok, image is I think really cool. It's like one of my favorite vampire sort of, depictions,
Totally.
Like even when you watch the silent film version of it, it's like, it's creepy as hell, man.
It is. It really is, man. Even to this day, even though it's so normalized, because I've seen it so many times, to this day, when you watch some of that footage, I'm like, yo, that is creepy. It's really effective.
Yeah. No, definitely. I just watched it. I watched it recently. I have it on Blu-ray, and I also have that Werner Herzog remake of it. With it's there's a Nosferatu. It's like German and in English, and it's got Klaus Kinski in it and stuff like that.
Oh, I think I know what you mean. Yeah, and obviously there's Salem's Lot, which has a Nosferatu kind of thing in Salem's Lot, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, Barlow. Barlow is straight up like ripped off of Nosferatu.
But I think I do know. I have it in my head of another Nosferatu. Yeah, all right. But is it called Nosferatu? Or do they call it something else? The remake.
Yeah, it's called Nosferatu, and Werner Herzog directed it, and there's a version in German and in English, and it's not dubbed actually. It's like they straight up filmed it in both English and in German.
Oh, are you serious? They refilmed the movie twice?
If I'm not mistaken, that's because I have both versions and it's not dubbed. It's just they're speaking English in one. Yeah.
Damn. Well, I know
And
the original.
Isabella Johnny's in it, who's like she plays like Mina or whatever, and that character that would be Mina from the Dracula, because basically it's a ripoff. It's a retelling of Dracula,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just like I don't know, it's
Dracula.
just Bruno Gantz is in it, who's like awesome. It's like I don't know, it's just a cool like revisualization of the whole story.
I got to check that out, man. I don't think maybe I've heard or seen images from it, but I have never seen it all the way through. That's interesting. And it's not silent, obviously. It's not a silent.
No, it's, and then Herzog's always has an interesting take on it. You ever see his version of Bad Lieutenant, Werner Herzog?
No.
If you're familiar with the original, it's like a Abel Ferrara, like bad cop movie, like Bad Lieutenant from the 90s. It's like Harvey Keitel is like, just like going buck wild in New York City, like smacking people and like, doing drugs and stuff, and like Herzog didn't remake it, but he kind of took inspiration from that film and made another film that takes place in New Orleans with Nicolas Cage as the cop.
Is it recent?
It came out like maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, okay, so pretty recent. That's cool.
Yeah, it's not that old, and the thing that I always thought was the funniest thing about it is like he's a cop, right? But he's carrying his handgun around just like stuffed down the front of his pants. Like this doesn't have like a holster for it or anything like that. He's just like walking around with his like departmental piece like stuck in the waistband of his slacks,
What's the original called?
The original is called Bad Lieutenant.
Bad Lieutenant.
Yeah, and the remake, well, it's not even a remake. The Herzog version of that is called Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans.
That's awesome, man. I gotta check. I
both
love
of them. You should watch side by side.
There's
a couple of scenes in there that are like mirror images of each other, I guess. Like one, like there's a famous scene in the first one of Harvey Keitel like hassling these two young girls driving around New York City, like they have like a headlight out or something like that. So he like harasses these two women, these young women, and of course he's like, where are you guys from? And he's like, New Jersey. These two girls, like bridge and tunnel chicks.
Love it.
And they're at the Cat Club in Manhattan or whatever. It's just like very 90s, you know what I'm saying?
Dude, sounds right up my alley, man. I gotta check. Bad Lieutenant.
Yeah. And then the one in New Orleans, there's another hassling of like a young woman scene in there too, which is like Nicolas Cage and smoking crack and like all this stuff. It's just real grimy. Like both of them were very grimy movies.
Love it.
Yeah. But so what about your video channel, man? It's like it feels like in the last few years you're more of like in an executive role at the studio. You're not doing everything.
Yes.
Right?
Dude, it's such a random. If you would have told me what I'm doing now, if you would have told me this is what I would be doing 10 years ago, I wouldn't believe it. Because I used to be the guy that I never used social media. Like I would just watch YouTube, let alone having a YouTube channel. Here's the story with that. So I don't even know why I did it. I think because now obviously because of technology, you have a DAW, you have Pro Tools. Like most people in bands have Pro Tools now, they have self-recording, which is great. I think even for bands that don't record themselves, it's a great tool for pre-production. It's important. I think everybody should have a DAW if you're a musician. But anyway, people ask me a lot of questions, right? And one of the most common questions I get is, how do I get a good guitar recording, right? Because it's hard. It's challenging. So, dude, on a whim, I put out a video. It was the most basic title ever. It was like how to mix heavy guitars. That's what I called it. This is like the end of 2017. And the video, I never have done a YouTube video. I never talked about what I did online at tutorials, never shot a tutorial in my entire life. And the video kind of blew up. So like people were like, oh, do another one, do one. And then people started asking me questions like, how do you mix kick drum? How do you mix bass? And I'm like, all right, I guess I'll make more of these things. I don't know. So I started making more. And then people would ask me like, okay, could you do a full course? So I put together a course. And, it's great for someone like me as a recording engineer. It's a great supplemental income, But running a YouTube channel, man, it really is a full-time job. Like if you're going to do it like multiple videos a week. And then now I have something called the Frightbox Mix Crypt, where like I have students that we mix a new song every single month. So like I have live calls I do in there privately with my community. Now I have multiple courses, and there's 1 to 2 videos being put out a week. So it's become my main gig. But the beauty of that for me as a producer is now I can do only the projects that I absolutely want to do, because for me at this point, it's just what I'm passionate about in the studio, like you were saying. So that's what it's become. And I love it.
Oh, let's give a shout out to Ben Karras. You know,
Dude.
your right-hand man.
Dude, I can't even, I probably couldn't even have that studio still if it weren't for Ben, to be honest with you, because we've collaborated on so many projects. For a while, he was doing a lot of the recording and I was doing a lot of the mixing. Now it's kind of like where he has his own projects completely, entirely, you know, like where I'm not involved at all. And then we still collaborate on certain things. But yeah, and also shout out to Brianna Testa, who does works out of the studio as well. So I have Brianna and Ben that both do work out of the studio. But Ben's there doing, he just did 2 records this month. He did a record with Tombstoner, not Tombs, Tombstoner, another great band, and another sick band too called Cranial Damage. You should check them out. They're brutal, crazy. Like, I don't even know what the hell you would call them. They're sick. Both bands are really sick. And Ben did produce both their records. So shout out to Ben Karras.
The talented Ben Karras, definitely.
Super talented, violin wielding Ben Karras.
Oh yeah. So now where does everyone, if they want to go to your channel, and like, is there a landing place for all this stuff? Like the studio, the channel, like you go to a website, or what's the story with that?
Super easy. If you just go on YouTube and type in Frightbox recording, you will find me. It's right there. And then if you want to visit the studio website, it's simple, frightboxrecording.com. And then, you know, if you're interested in the educational stuff, that's frightboxrecordingacademy.com. But you can honestly find everything from just the YouTube channel. Everything is there. And then the second YouTube channel, Frightbox Productions, is where I host all of our live performances. And that's something.
Oh yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that too. So what? Yeah, I kind of knew about that, but what's the breakdown on that, on the live stuff?
So another story I'll try to shorten. So I've always been a studio guy. I've never been a live sound guy, right? And around 6 years ago, a few years before the pandemic, there's this local venue by me called Dingbats, which we all know, you know, and they needed a sound guy, right? And I've done work out of another studio called North End, which is more of like a proper studio, really sick place. Shout out to Ed and JP who own the studio. But anyway, Ed's like, dude, I don't have time to do it. Can you do this live gig? And it ended up being a gig for the band Psycho Stick, like live sound gig for the band Psycho Stick. And I'm like, I've never done live sound in my life. I don't know if I could do this. So, dude, I ended up meeting with one of the head engineers at Dingbats, and it was this really talented kid, Cooper Davis, who's a sick live engineer. He gave me like a crash course on live sound. Now, luckily, there is overlap between live and studio stuff. So the first live sound gig I had ever done was a sold out show for the band Psycho Stick. It was a sweaty day, but dude, I ended up becoming addicted to the energy of live sound. So again, something I had no interest in my entire life. But while doing these live sound gigs, I realized, wait a minute, these digital boards, you could record at the same time. I'm like, how come nobody's doing this? So I started experimenting with it at the venue. And I would put these little clips together, and the bands really seemed to dig it. And right before the pandemic, my buddy Ryan Lehman and I started a side business where we were doing this. We were putting on our own shows. I'd record the entire show. If a band wanted to hire us to produce 2 of those songs, we would do it. Then the pandemic hit, and of course, nobody was in person anymore. And I got really busy with the YouTube channel, so that kind of took over. But now that has settled down, last year I started it up. I rebranded it as Frightbox Productions. Now we're doing it out of the studio and also out of venues. So I've done, there's a place near us called the Meat Locker. I've done a few Meat Locker shows and produced videos for those. I just did a live EP with Tombstoner last week at the Meat Locker. It was like an insane show, like packed. And luckily it all worked out great. But that's what it is, man. For me, I'm combining my 2 loves, my love for production and metal and music. And also I want the videos to have an old school kind of grindhousey 16mm aesthetic. So I'm combining those.
Cool.
Yeah. And eventually I want to take it to where like we have actual sets. So like there's like, you know, I don't know, like an old hotel kind of set, or like a old diner set. Like that's the level I want to take it, because there's an energy to it, man. Having a band play live, like, you know, you guys have done it, you know, yeah. I love it. It's an addiction. Like for me, it's not even about the money. I truly love doing those projects.
It's definitely fun, like filming something live, for sure. You know? Like even like in a setting like that, not just like a live show, but when you set up in a space and you kind of and play, it's like very interesting thing to do. It's fun, you know, too.
Oh, totally, man. Yeah. And even for me, it's fun as an engineer, because I love experimenting. You know, I do a lot of I set up a lot of room mics and ambient mics to capture I feel like it's an underserved market, man, because there's so much you could do with it, and not many people seem to be doing it. I see online people will have really good video production, but then they don't mix the audio. Or like if they're doing a pop act, like you could tell nobody edited the toms on the drums and the tune, and the vocals aren't tuned and things like that. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I know that we've amongst ourselves talked about doing something with you too at some point, but we have to have like, I want to have some like new stuff out. You know what I mean? Like something new to do that with,
Oh, you're saying the live thing.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Like maybe, we're working on, we have like, little, foreshadowing of a new record at some point, but we're working on new shit too. So
I've heard Ninja was telling me. I'm excited to hear it, man.
Yeah, I think you would appreciate it for sure. A lot of different stuff going in there than we did on the last record. So always trying to move forward,
So now it's you, Ninja, Drew, and Mo Stern.
So the great Todd Stern, yeah, he's in the band now. Todd's famous, man. Like everyone knows Todd, either from being a sick guitar player or bass player. He plays the bass in Psychroptic.
That's it. That's the other thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Or all of his work on the road with different bands. He's like an entity unto himself,
Definitely. Yeah, I've known Todd just as long as Ninja. Almost, God, we're pushing 20 years, about 17 years or 18 years around there. Crazy to
That's
think
awesome.
That. Yeah.
Dude, he's like one of the most like on point dudes I've ever met in my entire life.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
It's like he can fill almost every role on tour. He can tour manage, he can do merch, obviously. He's a master at all high level. Like people are like, oh, do merch, like sit behind a table. Like, no, I mean, manage like a merchandise inventory for a major band. He can do all that.
Yeah.
Drive. He can back up with the trailer, which is like always a big, that's like a huge drive a trailer, truck with a trailer, which is always a big thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's funny. Like last year when we did that tour at Origin, we had a funny we committed some crimes together too. And now it's like it's a year has gone by. I think the statute of limitations, ran out on the crimes we've committed out on tour. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, it's fun, man. It's just like good vibes. Everyone gets along, and it's just cool. And yeah, it's cool. Like everyone works together. Like that's how I met you through all those guys. And it's just like it's a good atmosphere out here.
A great dude. What a great group of guys, man. And and it's ever evolving. That's how I met Madeiros and all those guys. And I met guys. It's just insane. The local metal, it's even beyond the local metal scene at this point, but it's all one giant metal family, so to speak.
Yeah, Matt's out on tour with Black Anvil now. He's playing.
It's funny. I didn't know that until like I saw a picture of him playing in front of this huge crowd. I'm like, oh, that's sick. I had no idea until like last week or even less than, it was like Monday or something. It's cool.
Yeah, he's out with them. That's cool. That big tour with Enslaved. That's pretty awesome. They're playing at Vitus in a couple weeks. I'm gonna stop in, hang out, and check those guys out again.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. But dude, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is going to air after the Voidscape show, unfortunately.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good.
The show's tomorrow, actually. So
yeah, dude, it's funny. We had never played together as a band before Saturday, and we already have a show tomorrow. That's a less than
awesome. I'm going to be there. I'm going to come out for it.
Oh, awesome, man! Hell yeah!
Yeah, I'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I can't wait. It's going to be great to see everybody again. Play. All right, dude. Thanks a lot, man.
Well, dude, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this. I know we talked about it about a year ago, and it finally happened. So, got to do it again sometime.
Absolutely, man. I mean, that's, why limit it just to one time? We got so much other stuff to probably talk about. So,
dude, if we're talking about metal and horror, I'm there. I could talk for hours about that stuff.
You got it, man. I'll have you back on sooner than you think, man.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
All right, dude. I'll see you tomorrow, man. Take care.
Right, sounds good. I'll see you tomorrow. Later.
Bye.